On the Gruely True Sports Network. The NFL show, as always, is brought to you by Path of Purity. Make sure you check them out at pathofpurity.direct. You get a 2-month supply of organic CBD. You stick it underneath your tongue. It goes into your system over a 12-hour time period, time released. Make sure you check them out at pathofpurity.direct. I'm your host for the NFL show, Mike Goodpasser. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Sam Teets. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing great, Mike. It's awesome to be on today.
All right, Sam. See, Sam usually doesn't look this excited, so you can tell he's
I am. Hey, I'm very excited.
All right, and we have one of the most legendary Pittsburgh Steelers, won a national championship at the University of Notre Dame in 1966, won 4 Super Bowls with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Help me welcome to the show, Rocky Bleier. How you doing, Rocky?
Yeah, I'm fine, guys. Thank you very much for having me on your show. That's great.
All right, and we're going to let Sam ask the first question, just because he's nervous and he's expecting me to ask the first question.
Yeah, you know what? You hit the nail right in the head there, Mike. But obviously, Rocky, we have you on here leading up to the Super Bowl matchup between Tampa Bay and Kansas City. You won quite a few Super Bowls during your time in the NFL. People react a little differently to experiencing those rewarding moments, but what was generally your response to winning the Super Bowl? Was there any kind of personal way you celebrated winning?
Oh, winning Super Bowls, is that what was the question? In any way that we had it, all right, and so usually it was. I can remember the first one. We had the team had a party afterwards, and so that was a big thing. And after every Super Bowl that we had won, there was a team gathering. So you could have family come, and they would have food and so on after the game, and keep everybody together. So that was it. A couple times I went out skiing after after the Super Bowl, and took my family out, and so but that was about it. Nothing more exciting than that.
Well, in the first Super Bowl win, the first one's always the most special, but when you've got your owner, Art Rooney, who everybody loved, gets to finally win a Super Bowl after 40 or 50 years, people forget the Pittsburgh Steelers, those first 40 or so years, I don't even know if they ever made the playoffs, so it had to make it even more special to be able to give that to him.
Oh, very much so. So you're right. I mean, for the first 40 years of their history prior to that game, they were the losingest team in the National Football League. And so it was a great it was a great tribute to Mr. Rooney by just football fans specifically, and then by the league and the owners, because of all the time that he had spent within the league, and being one of the early members that they got the team in '33, and so and helped it grow to where it is today. So there was a lot of pleasure, I think, by everybody in the NFL when that had taken place, and so it was great to be able to see him get the trophy in the locker room and on that presentation, and so it was well deserved.
Right, Sam?
Yeah, is there... Hang on one second. I was going to ask, you won 4 Super Bowls, obviously, between 1974 and 1979, with the last one coming in that 79 season. But was there ever a season where you felt like in between there, Pittsburgh should have won but didn't? Was there ever a Super Bowl or a year that you felt got away from the team?
Well, I don't know. I mean, they talk about '76 specifically. The fans, football fans, but Steeler fans specifically. Talking about 1976. 1976 was a team it was an unusual season. We lost 4 out of our first 5 games in 1976. When you're playing 14 games, all of a sudden you can find yourself behind the 8 ball very quickly. In the remaining 9 games, and this is where the team turns, the defense came alive. We shut out 5 of those opponents, only allowed 23 points scored, minus yards rushing in those 9 games. The interesting dynamics possibly that helped create that season was in 1976. against Cleveland, a sack by Joe Turkey Jones that pile drove Bradshaw into the turf, leaving him flapping like a fish out of water as they carted his body off the field. Backup quarterback we had was a young rookie by the name of Mike Krzyzek. And then all of a sudden he had to take over the reins. And in so doing, we had to simplify, obviously, the offense. And so we became a running team, control ball. In those 9 games, he only threw the ball 17 times in 9 games. I mean, quarterbacks might throw it 17 times in a quarter, I mean, today, but 17 times in the remaining part of the season. But because of the defense, it was 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. Offensively, we controlled the ball, we ran, we were, they picked up the challenge, that offensive line. And in so doing, both Franco and I gained 1,000 yards rushing in one season in 1976. And we get to the playoffs, and we're playing Baltimore in Baltimore, playing the Colts, and we beat them. I mean, we beat them handedly in that game to kick us off to the championship game the following week. But in that game, Franco got hurt with bruised ribs, couldn't breathe, and I got a turf toe in a tackle, and so it didn't get any better for the week, and so both of us were out of the game against the Oakland Raiders, and we went out to the West Coast, and ultimately we lost that game because of not having a full team.
Yeah,
that's our excuse anyway. But anyway, so that was and the Oakland Raiders had a great team, and it wasn't as if it was going to be an easy win. They had a great team going into that championship game. But people like to point to say what that team had accomplished, what the defense had done, what the offense had done, and had that momentum going to the playoffs, is that we should have been able to go back, and defend the Super Bowl title and possibly win it that year.
Yeah, but I think it shows how great that team was that you lose Terry Bradshaw and you still just fall one game short of the Super Bowl. Now, Bradshaw did play the playoff games, but the game in Baltimore, that Colts team with Burt Jones, who I think is one of the underrated quarterbacks of all time because he got hurt a year or so after that and was never the same. But that was a great team. And the Oakland Raiders were 13-1 that year. And the New England Patriots were also a great football team that year. They lost a controversial game to the Raiders in the playoffs, but that was a great season. But as a Bengal fan, I just remember the snow game. Boobie Clark fumbled the ball when the Bengals were up 3-0 and could have won the division.
The snow game. I got to tell you about the snow game in Cincinnati. Wow, what a game.
It's the first game I ever went to.
Is that right? Oh,
yeah.
Yes. So, Cincinnati Stadium was much like Three River Stadium, and they had 20-yard tarps that covered the field rather than big full tarps at the time. And so, much like at Three Rivers, it happened there. Over there, the storm came in, wind was taking place, blew off the tarps. The field was frozen underneath, and so they had put antifreeze on the turf to try to give it better footing and soften we didn't know that at the time, but that game it was, I can remember we came out of the end zone in that game onto the field, and the Bengals bench is on the right hand side. The Steelers bench is on the left-hand side. And so we usually, by league ruling, would warm up at the far end of the team on the field. And so the Bengals are down at the far end of warming up in our territory. And the sun was just coming up over, and shining down on that side of the field at that moment in time. And so, and Chuck assessed the situation, and all of a sudden he goes, "Oops, let's go down," and so we go down. Now there's confrontation between the two coaches about who's got what, so on and so on, and so that that started the game. There were some words said there that I cannot repeat on this broadcast between the two head coaches and assistant coaches, and this fight almost ensued at the beginning of that game. Well, and so because of the antifreeze, all of a sudden things started to get slick. You know, we had gloves, it was cold, you couldn't hang onto the ball. Anyway, so what happens is that when you don't have a whole lot of talent, like me, and you're not fast, like me, all of a sudden our running game took off. So Sam Davis, who was our guard, and myself, I gained 136 yards in that game and made the cover of Sports Illustrated in that snow game. Only because of the fact that everybody else was slipping, everybody else thought they had speed, they were running by, couldn't stop quick enough to make tackles or whatever it is. And so Sam and I just plugged along, moving very steadily throughout that game, and ultimately we finally won that game. But I remember that game was a cold game. It's snowy but anyway, so.
All right, so Tom Brady's playing the Super Bowl this coming weekend, but Bill Belichick isn't. Bill Belichick and Tom Brady obviously are known as one of the best quarterback-coach duos of all time. Belichick is usually very stoic, but sometimes he gets a little more emotional after winning a Super Bowl. What was Chuck Noll like after winning Super Bowls? Was it ever any different than what he was beforehand or what he was during the regular season?
No. He was the same. No, he didn't change. He was the same. He was the same, and Chuck was not a rah-rah kind of guy. He was not an emotional kind of guy. He was just, very matter-of-fact professor-like, teacher-like, and so we won the game. His post-game speech wasn't any different than any other post-game speech. Along the way, we did a good job. Everybody did what was expected. So on and so on. And he'd come around and he'd shake everybody's hands, and that basically was it. But this kind of puts it in perspective. Is that Marianne, his wife, told the story. It was after Super Bowl IX, and so we got the press conference after the Super Bowl. He's tied up and everything else. All the family went back to the hotel to be able to change before we went to the big party that we would have. And Marianne was very nervous. I mean, her husband's the head coach of it. The first time that the Steelers have ever won a Super Bowl. And so she was anticipating for him to come back into the hotel room. She didn't know what to do, what to say. I mean, about Chuck. And so all of a sudden, the key goes into the lock, and she hears the door open up, and she stands up, and he walks in, and she walks towards him, and he walks towards her, and she's going to go embrace him, and he goes, well, shakes hand. There we go. Well, we did it. And that was a big hug, wasn't it? So that was kind of Chuck's foray, I suppose, or his demeanor. So yeah, there wasn't a big deal about Chuck.
All right, so Sam brought up Tom Brady. There's a lot of GOAT talk, and it seems to really intensified over the past 10 years, especially with regards to Tom Brady. In your opinion, is Brady the GOAT, or is it even fair to be having these kind of discussions because the game's so different than what it used to be?
Well, the game really is different than it used to be.
Yeah, Turkey Jones didn't get a $300,000 fine for that hit on Bradshaw, did he?
No, not at all.
Was it a 15-yard penalty, and they told him not to do it again?
Yeah, that's right. Roughing the passer, that was it. So the game, yeah, obviously, as we've seen, the game has changed. The rules have changed in that game. For instance, and I'll just put this aside and I'll tell you one of the reasons why. But so in our case, we won 4 Super Bowls in 6 years, and the reason that we did that was because of the fact we have, I think, 23 players or 24 players that have 4 Super Bowl rings. 24 players that were there for that 6-year period of time. That wouldn't happen today. I mean, be free agency, people would be moving here or there, trades would be taking place. And so that's why you don't see as well the dynamics that take place. If you look at the Patriots over that period of time, and the success that they had, they pretty much stayed together. And Belichick was able to find people who and make the right move at the right time for people to leave and or trade, and then find somebody to fit their role just as well. So he kind of really had continuity in that in that leadership. But anyway, so coming into this game, you got a quarterback that has a whole lot of experience, a lot of faith. He's in good shape. He's not hurt. Doesn't have a bad arm. Is not limping around. Can make a difference. Has got an offense that is able to protect him, or at least what I've seen so far. But also, I think that he has more input in his selection of what he wants to get done and how to do it than he had with the Patriots. And I think that possibly is a big difference in being able to lead this team to whatever results they get. But I think that I think this game basically will be. I'm really looking forward to it. In my estimation, it'll be one of those games that it'll be the great catch. And or the big mistake, a fumble that you didn't expect might happen, to be able to turn this the tide one way or the other. And I think they're relatively, in my mind anyway, pretty even along the boards as far as talent is concerned.
Yeah, and we talk about quarterbacks. The guy that I think gets underrated all the time is Terry Bradshaw. He won 4 Super Bowls, and I don't think people realize that he threw a touchdown pass in the fourth quarter of every one of those games, and those were against great defenses. You had the Vikings, you had the Cowboys, you had the Cowboys twice, actually, and then you had a really good Rams defense in 1979 where
Right.
you guys had to come from behind in the fourth quarter to win. Do you think a lot of times it's just because of the NFL pregame show and he's on that and he just looks goofy and people just don't take him serious?
That's right. He's been goofy since he came here. And so just to put it into perspective for your viewers and listeners out there, is that Terry was the number 1 pick coming to the Steelers back in 1970, and was then kind of heralded as the savior of the Steelers as we're moving into another decade. He had everything going for him except that he was from Louisiana. He had that good old boy drawl, and just had that little Southern accent. It comes across as not being real smart. And unfortunately, then he was kind of like labeled. And along the line, when you're on the spotlight and you make mistakes, all of a sudden those mistakes stick with you because people, identify with a mistake you made here, this or a bad call here, or drop ball out of your hands, and why did that happen, or whatever it might be. And so he had to live through that period of time. And I also and I think this becomes very important because it's how you perceive a person without even having to know them or who they are. For instance, if I should say Roger Staubach, in your mind, automatically, you have an image, whatever that image is. If I should say Terry Bradshaw, it's not the same image as Roger Staubach. And so you've created another image, and so that he reinforces it only because of he tells good stories, but he's kind of goofy at times, or we may perceive him as being goofy. He's got opinions, and so he's not afraid to tell them. He's on television, and he's still got that good old boy. Now he's put a couple pounds on, lost his hair. So,
he never had his hair, did he, Rocky?
That's right. Not long.
He was born bald and he stayed bald.
And so, but as we like to say, all the way to the bank, he's laughing, but he's really good. But he's really. I'm going to tell you this because I've said this in the past. We would not have won those 4 Super Bowls if we did not have Bradshaw, and I mean that in all honesty. He had a sense of winning. He had a sense of being able to make things happen, and he continues to make things happen when he's on television or in his show. So anyway, that's what he is.
You had a lot of great teammates over the years, but a couple of them are in the Hall of Fame that maybe deserve consideration. What do you think about guys like Elsie and Greenwood, or maybe even Andy Russell not being in the Hall of Fame?
Well, now this man's done his homework there. And so that's always
we talk about it all the time with both of them. I mean, because I got to interview Andy Russell a couple of years. Andy Russell was a great player, and L.C. Greenwood is a guy that really, until 5 or 6 years ago, I just assumed was in the Hall of Fame.
That's right. And unfortunately, and what happens? No, Andy more than anybody else probably deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. And I'm not saying that he retired, so he just retired maybe at the wrong time. I mean, it was at the end of his career. I understand that. Could he have played a couple more years? Yeah, probably. Hang on. So he retired after the Super Bowl 10. And then all of a sudden we have, the next series of Super Bowls coming on. And that should be enough because I'm sure there are people in the Hall of Fame. But then all of a sudden it started to get hot. So then we as players, or members of the team, started to become eligible for, their Hall of Fame. And so we got 10 guys in the Hall of Fame. And even if we were to bring it up, to get Andy in, and Andy, well, people forget of what he had accomplished, what he's done. He doesn't have a big advocate, pushing him to get it. But all his statistics and everything that he has worked for really designates him as being in the Hall of Fame. And so, he was an all-pro linebacker. Before Chuck got there, he was an all-pro linebacker in years of when we won 2 games, like my rookie year, he became all-pro linebacker. So he does have the credentials. He just didn't have the push or the backing by the right people to get him up. And LC is the same way. LC made a big impact as a defensive end. And there was a lot of guys that did. And LC was one that as well should be at least considered being in that Hall of Fame. But there are a lot of people on that list that should be Hall of Famers that aren't.
Yeah, what do you think they should do about the old timer selection? Because now you got a lot of guys voting for it that haven't even heard of these guys. And I've interviewed a lot of them before, guys that should be in the Hall of Fame. Kenny Anderson, Ken Riley. How about a guy like Eddie Metter? You remember Eddie with the Rams? He still holds 6 Rams records to this day. Don't you think maybe more than 1 or 2 of these guys should be let in every year?
I agree. I mean, I agree. And, so it's like, but it's trying to find that advocate, to be able to push those players into the light. And I don't, so I don't know whether you need to come up with some criteria for older players in this regards, where you go, okay, fine, if they've, been all pro for 5 years or, a minimum of, need to be able to establish themselves, records that they hold, impact that they have. But you're right, people forget because there's so much going on, and, and time moves on, and about great players that had played the game.
Yeah, I think you mentioned there's actually a funny thing I just saw the other day. Tom Flores, I guess, who coached mostly in the 80s for the Raiders. There's actually a commercial out there now advocating for him to get in the Hall of Fame. It's kind of briefly mentioned in the commercial now. So you do need a little bit of that public attention, I think, if you want to build some momentum there for the Hall of Fame. But I think he's someone who should be in. He's someone to keep an eye on here.
Right.
My next question for you is, we talked about that 76 season. That was the only year of your career you had over 200 carries and you ran for over 1,000 yards. Do you wish, or at the time did you wish, that you got more carries every year to potentially have more rushing yards, or was it more like we're just winning, so would it matter?
No, no. I think this, from my point of view, is that within the scheme of things, you have a responsibility. I mean, so you have your role in which you play, and so then it's how you play that role. So for me, when I had a chance to play, it wasn't because I didn't want to be like Franco. I wasn't trying to compete with Franco. I mean, so you fit into a system, and part of that system was the ability to block, or being a blocking back for Franco, being able to catch the ball coming out of the backfield, and so you fit that role. For me specifically, it's the success of the team, the success of that era, that elevated my position within the confines of what that team accomplished. And so I was happy to play my role, be a part of it, and get recognized for that contribution, as all the other members on the team had as well. So yeah, so no, it was never. I never felt like I was cheated, or I felt like that it was it was what it was, and so I was happy to be able to be there.
Hey, Franco may have got more carries, but he didn't have a movie made about him.
Well, that's true. I tell him that too. So.
Sam has not seen that movie, by the way, Rocky. Sam's never seen any movie, we've found out. He's never even seen like Hoosiers or The Godfather.
Hey, Sam, how old are you?
I'm 21 years old.
Holy mackerel.
Well, he's got to have the beard, because if you shave the beard off, he looks like he's 12.
Yeah, he's right. Mike's right about that. I told Mike before. He's correct. I need this.
All right, so let's look at the current Steelers. They started off the year 11-0, then it kind of went to heck. Whenever you lose to the Browns twice in back-to-back weeks, and you lose to the Bengals right before that, I told Sam that was going to happen, not the Bengal part. But when you look at this, Big Ben's 39 years old. Do you think they should keep Big Ben around, or do you think that maybe it's time for Big Ben to kind of go away?
Well, it's getting to that point, and I'm not saying so. I'm going to say this, and I'm not saying that it's Ben's fault, and I don't know, and I should say I don't know how much Ben has to say so in the direction of what that and where that offense was going. Now, given the fact that Ben had the elbow problem, given the fact that he is older, given the fact that he has been, beaten up throughout the years. All right, fine. They put an offense in that, as everybody says, quick release, under 2 seconds. The ball's gone, a lot of movement, and that was not necessarily Ben's game all those years before. He'd sit in that pocket, ward off defenders, and wait for the big play to happen, or a broken play that ultimately would win this game, or put them ahead. So offensively, they changed the game, and they got away from a running game because of it, and so. What happens now? They got rid of the offensive coordinator, got rid of the offensive line coach. They got rid of the secondary coach. They made some changes there, which I don't necessarily believe in, but they made those changes. So what are you going to do with Ben? Well, they'll probably have Ben one more year. I mean, they'll probably keep Ben up to the end of his contract, and because they don't have anybody coming up, my opinion, in underneath, they give them a fighting chance. I mean, nobody's really prove what can happen. Even, they made a trade recently, but that doesn't solve the problems. And so I don't know what's going to happen, with the offense. offensive line. You know what? And I should say this: what got them off to an 11-0 start this year, specifically under the pandemic, under the restrictions, under the amount of time that they practice, didn't practice, the unknown of when they're going to play, how many exhibition games, is that they had a veteran team to begin with. And so because of that, you could rely on their experience in the past to get you through. And basically, that's what happened. Defensively, over the last several years, they reinforced their secondary, which was a weakness. They got linebackers that are starting to play and come up to their potential. So defensively, they were playing well. And then, as I like to say, is that the season is in 4 quarters, and the first 4 games become very important because usually they are like exhibition games. The starting offense and defense finally get to play together as a whole as you're going through all the draft choices and free agents beforehand to be able to make the team. So if you can come out of that like 3-1, 2-2 at the best, maybe 4-0, well, you got to step on everybody else. And then the second games, you finally get into the season, you're starting to settle in that. If you go 500 there, well, you're still at maybe 6-2, going into the latter part of the season. What they never did was they never got better. They stayed at a plateau. And everybody else started to get better. They started to have momentum. They started to come together as a team and found their strengths and found their beliefs of what they could accomplish. And so you get to 11-0, and everybody here, and I think I've said they should have probably lost 3 or 4 of those games, and they didn't. But now they're 11-0. They're drinking the Kool-Aid, or the fan base is, 11-0, first time ever in the history, the Steelers. And then they run into an upcoming Washington defense that all of a sudden stops them. And you go, oh, okay, fine. But now you're looking at that film. So all the following opponents are looking at the Washington film. Then they're looking at the Buffalo film. Then they're looking at everybody else and how how do we take care of that quick passing? And anyway. So my opinion was just that. It was that they got to a point and everybody surpassed them because they had the momentum, they had a belief system, they were getting better. And the Steelers just never got any better.
Yeah, wouldn't you say, Rocky, that it's probably safe to say with Joe Burrow now on board, the Cincinnati Bengals are probably going to dominate the next 10 years?
Oh, it could happen,
See, Sam? It could. Now, see, Sam bounced off. Let's see. All right, Rock. When we look at the Super Bowl 55 matchup, great matchup. You've got Patrick Mahomes, the young gun, against Tom Brady. How do you look at this game? Who do you favor here and why?
Well, oh golly. So I look at this game. I look at this game as a really a good football. I look at it as a very good football. I'm looking forward to it without without diagnosing all and everything on both sides, which I'm really not informed to do. But as I view it, I look at what Brady has done, what he brings, the fact that he is now in a position to, run his offense, call his plays, kind of be a coach there. Given the game that he had in the championship game, he came up with, big plays to be able to do that. So he's got some momentum. He's got a team behind him. Then you got Kansas City, who's defending champions, and so you got Mahone. They've played well. So I guess as I'm sitting here as a fan, and I'm really saying that as a fan, not as having any insight or knowledge into both teams very deeply, is that my heart is with the Patriot. I mean, with Tampa. and Tom Brady. I'd like to see that happen. But the rationale is that it looks like Kansas City, it might have the edge there when you look at offensive, defensive, what they have accomplished. I think it'll be a game of big plays. I think it'll be the one big catch that may happen, or the fumble that may take place that no one anticipates, or the one mistake that somebody makes along the line. You can't count on. I think they're pretty evenly matched, and so it's like we'll see what happens.
All right, Sam. Anything else for Rocky?
Yeah. What should Pittsburgh address first this offseason? Because I think quarterback, you can't really do much with that because of the way the cap situation is. And Ben, I'm assuming Ben's probably coming back for one more year, I think. Do you fix the offensive line or the backfield first? Because the backfield, you're losing James Conner for agency. You've got offensive line-wise Marquise Pouncey might retire, and Alejandro Villanueva and Matt Feiler are both free agents. So do you address the offensive line first, or is the backfield your priority? Which one would you go to first on that offense?
Well, it's going to be okay. Fine. It's going to be. I think that it's what's available in the draft. I mean, it's at that time. Where are they? Who's available? If there is a running back that's available, I mean, if within their confines, that'll probably be who they take. Is a running back. Now, that doesn't take anything away from their running game. I think that their running game was okay. I mean, the year before it did, fine. They sustained it. Offensive line, and it just needed to be changed, or blocking schemes needed to be changed. You can't, you got to teach run blocking. You got to teach run blocking. It's not the same as a 2-second drop back release, where you just punch and drop back, punch and drop back. It's a whole different mentality. And you need an offensive line coach to be able to do that, and an offensive mindset. So I think they can get by with their offensive line as it is, even with the young players who have been in their backup role. But unless there is some outstanding offensive lineman that happens to be available at that time, then you'd probably have to pick them and have to take them. But I think they're okay. They'll be okay in their offensive line. So I would probably think of a running back.
All right, Sam. Anything else?
If Lynn Swann or John Stallworth had gone out and danced on the logo of some other team in the middle of the field before the game to do a TikTok dance, how would Chuck Noll have responded?
I wouldn't worry about Chuck Noll. I would worry about Jack Lambert. And so, and Joe Green, basically, is that, one of the things that, and as you can see, the game changed because of it, is that I also think that peer leadership or peer pressure becomes so important in the confines of having a successful team. It's not the coach that yells and screams all the time. It's your fellow ball player. They'll bring you to task because of something stupid that you did, or we don't do that around you. So obviously the mindset has changed. I couldn't go back. I could never be a head coach. You ever think about, oh yeah, maybe I could be a head coach today. And it would be like, okay, they would probably lynch me only because you go back. You're an old guy. You're old school. We can't have that today. So I mean, that.
Well, I think the only way you get a job now today, Rocky, is if you're like under 40 and you've met Sean McVay before.
That's right. That's good.
That's how the Bengals pick their head coach.
That's right. And
that's not working out real well.
That's right. So anyway, that's Chuck. Chuck had a pretty, he was going back in the 70s, so Chuck had a pretty good sense of what needed to be done. And his speech every year is that this is what our expectations are. You're a professional football player. and we have to set up a fine basis, but the point is that we don't want to fine you. I don't want your money. Just do what you're supposed to do. So, we have a meeting, be on time. That's it. Don't be late. Know your assignments. Basically, that's it. We got a curfew for a reason, to get rest, not to punish you. So don't stay out after curfew, okay? And so we had these guidelines, and part of the guidelines is the expectation of being on the field, of having respect for one another and the opposing team, and that was kind of an attitude, obviously, at the time. We didn't do that. I can remember a situation. We had a young rookie. We had a young rookie on the team in an exhibition game, and he caught his first touchdown pass. And so he simply, took the ball and did a little shuffle and busted it on the ground. And he came off the sidelines. And Joe Green was standing there. He goes, "Hey, Rook, you trying to embarrass me?" "No, Joe, what do you mean? Are you trying to embarrass me?" Joe, I don't understand." He said, "You know that little dance you just did out there? That embarrasses you. You're my teammate. That embarrasses me. We don't do that here." That was the end of that.
End of the player's career, or just the end of that?
Not the end of, yeah, it probably was the end of his career anyway.
All right, Rocky. Final question. I've talked to a lot of guys. I got a friend, Joe Kelly, played for the Bengals Super Bowl 23. When you sit down Sunday and that game's getting ready to kick off, does it just kind of come to you how overwhelming that I won 4 of these?
No, not really. I mean, in all honesty, I don't even think about that. I just, I feel very grateful about being able to be in those Super Bowls, being at that time, and if I really get serious and you go, wow, if you look at your career and what happened and how did that happen, and, why you, and, and so if I look at it, how can you be at a school at Notre Dame and then you win the national championship, or in high school, and then all of a sudden you win the state championship, then in the pros, and you get on a team that wins 4 Super Bowls, and you're a part of that. And so sometimes I just pinch myself in that regards. But I'm more focused on what's happening today. Okay, guys, who's going to win this game, and so I hope it's a good one.
All right,
mistakes.
Tomorrow our guest is a guy who you took that Super Bowl ring from. Chuck Foreman will be on the show tomorrow for the Minnesota Vikings.
Yes.
So we will have another all-pro running back tomorrow, Chuck Foreman. He played in 3 Super Bowls. Unfortunately for him, they didn't turn out as good as your 4 did.
That's right, they did. Well, say hi to Chuck. Oh, what a great player Chuck was.
I definitely will. He already told me to tell you hi when I told him who was going to be on my day.
Well,
so
that's great.
Sam, any final words for Rocky?
Oh, you're an absolute legend. I really appreciate you coming on the show and humoring me at the very start there where I was a little nervous. So thank you for coming on.
Sam's still nervous. He just giggled.
I'm excited. I'm happy.
That's right. That's great. 21 years old. Man.
Yeah, I mean, heck, if you got Jack Lambert's phone number, we can make him fall completely apart. All right, guys. Tomorrow, Chuck Foreman. Rocky, as always, a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks, guys. That was a pleasure. Thanks, Mike. Thanks.
All right. We'll talk to you later, Rocky.
Thanks, Sam. All right.
All right, guys. Tomorrow we'll have Chuck Foreman on. Are you all right, Sam?
I'm fine. I'm still good.
That's the biggest smile I've ever seen on your face.
Hey, no, that was awesome. I'm incredibly grateful you were able to get him on the show. That was great.
But all right, and if Steve Risley's going to text me shortly asking why he couldn't be on the show, you got to be on the show with Rocky last time. All right, tomorrow, Chuck Foreman. Thursday, we'll have all-pro kicker from the Kansas City Chiefs, Nick Lowry. Friday, we'll have our Pick'em show where we pick the games. Right now, it looks like Richard Smith from the KC Kingdom representing the Chiefs will be here. Steve Risley representing Imbeciles from Indianapolis. He will be here. Of course, Sam and I will be here. We may add another guest or two also. I think Steve Rizzer may come on with us. That show may have to run a little bit later than 1 o'clock, Sam, if that's all right. So we'll keep everybody up to date there, or we'll just do 2 shows that day and I'll get another guest. So,
yeah, no, either one's fine. I'll be around.
All right, guys, remember to check out pathofpurity.direct for all your CBD needs. It's just a little tablet you put under your tongue. It dissolves, goes immediately into your bloodstream. Time releases over the next 12 hours. Organic, can't say enough about it. Use it myself. My entire family does. Right now on pathofpurity.direct, you get a 2-month supply for the price of 1. You can follow Sam Teets at Sam Teets33. You can follow me at The Grueling Truth. Make sure you check us out on Facebook, YouTube. Sign up on Rockfin for free to get all of our content also. So for now, until tomorrow, I'm Mike Goodpastor. He's Sam Teets. You've been watching and listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.